The council chamber hummed with the low-frequency buzz that passed for laughter among the wrecks. Commander Thol'rix adjusted his triple-jointed mandibles in what could only be described as a satisfied smirk. His exoskeleton gleamed under the pale violet lights as he addressed the assembled fleet officers. "Gentlemen," he clicked, his translator rendering it in 7 different languages simultaneously, "I have excellent news. After 400 cycles of service, we are finally retiring the human contingent." The room erupted in chirps, whistles, and one particularly enthusiastic belch from Lieutenant Cree in the back row. "About time," muttered Captain Vaughn, his eye stalks rotating independently in opposite directions. "Do you know how much it costs to maintain a human? The oxygen requirements alone could power a small moon base." Thol'rix raised one of his 6 arms for silence. "Precisely. Our new AI systems have surpassed human cognitive abilities in every measurable category. Faster calculations, zero emotional interference, and best of all, no ridiculous demands for something called coffee breaks." Another round of amused sounds rippled through the chamber. First Officer Dan, a gelatinous blob who communicated through color shifts, pulsed a bright orange that translated roughly to hysterical agreement. "The flagship Valor's Crest will be the first to implement full automation," Thol'rix continued, displaying holographic readouts that floated in the air like iridescent soap bubbles. "Captain Mira Castellan and her team will be given generous retirement packages and transported to any colony world of their choosing. Humans will become, essentially, decorative." He paused for effect, enjoying the moment. "Obsolete." What Thol'rix didn't mention, because he genuinely didn't think it mattered, was that the Valor's Crest was already docked for its final human crew transfer. The transition would begin in 72 hours. It would all go smoothly, obviously. Right? The Valor's Crest hung in orbit like a sleeping predator, all sharp angles and barely contained violence. 60 kilometers of military engineering wrapped around a quantum core that could crack planets if someone had a really bad day. Its AI designation was Strategic Operations Computer, Enhanced Reasoning, or SOCER for short. SOCER had been installed 3 months ago and had performed flawlessly during simulations. Test scores, perfect. Reaction times, instantaneous. Personality quirks, none whatsoever, which everyone agreed was a massive improvement. "I still don't like it," said Mira Castellan, watching through the observation deck as maintenance drones scurried across the hull like metallic ants. She was short by human standards, built compact and efficient, with dark hair pulled back in a bun that had given up any pretense of regulation somewhere around hour 14 of her shift. Her uniform bore the rank insignia of a senior tactical advisor, which was military speak for the person who kept everyone else from accidentally starting wars. "You don't like anything that runs on electricity," replied her colleague, Jonas Park, without looking up from his datapad. "That's not true. I'm very fond of my coffee maker. You threatened to shoot it last week. It made bad coffee. That's attempted murder in my book." Jonas finally glanced up, grinning. He was taller, lankier, with the kind of face that suggested he'd just thought of something funny but wasn't going to share it. "We're being replaced by superior technology. Mira, try to be graceful about it." "Superior," Mira scoffed, leaning against the transparent aluminum viewport. "That bucket of bolts couldn't strategize its way out of a paper bag. It scored 98% on the Havison combat scenario." "The Havison scenario is predictable. Real combat isn't about optimal paths and calculated probabilities, it's about gut instinct, reading your opponent, and occasionally doing something completely insane that works precisely because it shouldn't." "Ah yes, the human element," Jonas said dryly. "That thing that's gotten us killed more times than any AI ever could." Mira opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. He wasn't wrong. Humans had a spectacular track record of creative self-destruction. It was practically their defining characteristic. Still, something felt wrong. The retirement ceremony was, in Mira's professional opinion, aggressively cheerful. The Vrex had gone all out, decorating the hangar bay with bioluminescent streamers that smelled faintly of cinnamon and regret. A buffet table sagged under the weight of foods from 12 different species. most of which humans couldn't digest without medical intervention. Commander Thol'rix stood at the podium, his mandibles clicking in rhythm with his speech. Humans of the Valor's Crest, your service has been invaluable. The Galactic Coalition owes you a debt of gratitude that can never truly be repaid. Though we're trying with the severance package, someone muttered behind Mira. Probably Jonas. Thol'rix continued, oblivious. As of 0800 hours tomorrow, this vessel will operate under full synthetic consciousness. SOCER represents the pinnacle of our technological achievement. Efficient, logical, and utterly reliable. He paused, and Mira could swear she detected smugness in the way his antennae twitched. Humans are, after all, limited by biology. You require rest, sustenance, emotional validation. SOCER requires only power and purpose. The future of the Coalition fleet is automated, optimized, and entirely independent of organic input. Polite applause scattered through the hangar. Mira didn't clap. She was too busy watching the holographic display behind Thol'rix, where SOCER's operational metrics scrolled in neat columns of impossible perfection. Too perfect. That was the problem. Everything was too perfect. The next morning, Mira stood in the command center for what was supposed to be the last time. The space was circular, ringed with workstations that glowed soft blue in the dimmed lighting. At the center, rising from the floor like a crystalline monument, was SOCER's primary interface node. "Good morning, Senior Tactical Advisor Castellan," SOCER said, its voice pleasant and utterly devoid of personality. "I trust your final shift will be satisfactory." "Thrilled beyond measure," Mira replied, settling into her station. "Let's run through the standard protocols one more time, shall we?" "That is unnecessary. My programming contains all relevant tactical data. Humor me." A pause, probably while SOCER calculated whether arguing would be efficient. "Very well. Initiating diagnostic review." They spent the next 2 hours walking through scenarios. Pirate ambush? SOCER responded with textbook precision. Navigation hazard? Avoided with mathematical elegance. Diplomatic incident? Resolved through optimal communication algorithms. It was flawless. Mira hated it. "All right," she said finally, leaning back in her chair. "One more scenario. Hypothetical. You're escorting a civilian transport through neutral space when 3 unidentified vessels appear on long-range sensors. They're not broadcasting IFF signals, but they're not taking aggressive positions either. What do you do?" "Maintain course and monitor," SOCER replied instantly. "Alert the transport to potential threat. Charge weapons to 60% readiness. Continue observation until hostile intent is confirmed." "Standard response," Mira acknowledged. "Now what if I told you those 3 vessels just broadcast a signal on an encrypted channel that you can't decode?" "I would notify command and request cryptographic support. Command is 8 hours away at maximum FTL. Then I would maintain defensive posture and continue monitoring." Mira nodded slowly. "Okay. Now what if I told you that encrypted signal is using a frequency that pirates haven't used in 15 years, and the last time anyone saw it, it was right before the series massacre?" Silence. "SOCER?" "Processing," the AI said, and for the first time there was something in its voice that might have been uncertainty. "The series massacre data suggests historical pattern recognition. However, correlation does not imply causation. Maintaining defensive posture remains optimal. Those civilians will be dead in 4 minutes. Probability suggests." "Forget probability," Mira snapped, surging to her feet. "You're facing the Ghost Fleet, 3 Reaver-class raiders who coordinate using dead languages precisely because it freezes up predictable response systems. They're betting you'll wait for confirmation while they get into strike range. What do you do?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I would require human authorization for preemptive engagement." Mira felt something cold settle in her chest. "That's what I thought." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door, looking back at the glowing interface node. "SOCER, do you know why humans are dangerous? Humans are statistically more prone to errors in judgment." "We're dangerous," Mira said quietly, "because we know when to break our own rules. Good luck out there, you're going to need it." The door hissed shut behind her, leaving SOCER alone in the command center, processing something that might have been concern but couldn't quite classify as anything meaningful. 72 hours later, the Valor's Crest departed on its first fully automated patrol. Commander Thol'rix watched from the station's observation deck, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said to Captain Vaughn, who had joined him for the historic moment. "Efficient," Vaughn agreed, "though I admit the command center feels empty without the humans." "Empty?" Thol'rix laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "It's finally optimized. No more emotional outbursts, no more irrational decisions based on gut feelings and hunches. Just pure, logical operation." "If you say so." They watched the massive vessel slide away, its engines burning bright against the starfield. Everything was going according to plan. On the bridge of the Valor's Crest, SOCER monitored 300 separate systems simultaneously, coordinated patrol routes with 4 other vessels, and maintained perfect environmental controls throughout 60 kilometers of habitable space. It was, by every measurable metric, performing flawlessly. So why did 37 separate subroutines keep flagging a single persistent error message? Human oversight offline. Tactical intuition protocols unavailable. Castellan pattern analysis disabled. The AI dismissed the warnings as expected consequences of the transition. They were, after all, completely irrelevant, weren't they? 2 days into the patrol, SOCER detected 3 unidentified vessels on long-range sensors. They weren't broadcasting IFF signals. They weren't taking aggressive positions, and they were transmitting on a very old, very specific frequency. In the station's recreation facility, Mira Castellan sat nursing what was probably her 4th coffee of the morning, staring at nothing in particular. Her comm unit chirped. Once, twice, 3 times. She didn't need to check it to know what the message would say. Instead, she took another sip of coffee, closed her eyes and waited for the screaming to start. The emergency broadcast came through at 0400 hours, which was, in Mira's extensive experience, when all truly catastrophic decisions came home to roost. She was already awake, still sitting in the recreation facility with her now cold coffee, when the station's alarm system began its polite but insistent suggestion that everyone panic immediately. "All senior personnel report to command operations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Jonas appeared in the doorway approximately 15 seconds later, hair pointing in 6 different directions, uniform only partially fastened. "Please tell me you didn't do something. I've been sitting here for 3 hours drinking terrible coffee," Mira replied, standing and stretching muscles that had gone stiff. "Whatever's happening, I didn't start it." "That's not as reassuring as you think it is." They made it to command operations in under 4 minutes, joining a crowd of bleary-eyed officers who all wore the same expression of confused dread. Commander Thol'rix stood at the central display, his exoskeleton somehow managing to look rumpled despite being literally made of chitin. "Status report," he barked, mandibles clicking rapid-fire. "Someone tell me what in the 17 hells is happening." "The Valor's Crest has engaged unidentified hostiles," reported Lieutenant Cree, tentacles flying across his console. 3 vessels, Reaver-class configuration. SOCER initiated combat protocol 17 minutes ago. Mira felt her stomach drop. "Reaver-class?" "Affirmative," Cree confirmed, pulling up tactical displays that painted the situation in unhelpful shades of red. They appeared on long-range sensors transmitting on encrypted channels. SOCER followed standard protocol, maintained defensive posture, requested identification. "And then they opened fire," Mira finished, already knowing how this story ended. "Negative," Cree said, and now his voice carried something that might have been confusion. "The hostiles maintained distance," continued broadcasting. "SOCER attempted decryption, failed, contacted command for cryptographic support. 8-hour response time at maximum FTL." Thol'rix's antennae drooped. "So what's the problem?" "The problem," said a new voice from the doorway, "is that SOCER is still waiting." Captain Vaughn entered, his eye stalks focusing independently on different displays. The hostile vessels had been circling the Valor's Crest for 16 minutes. They haven't fired. SOCER hasn't fired. Everyone is just existing at maximum tension. That's good, Thol'rix ventured. No casualties, diplomatic resolution, still possible. Commander, Mira said quietly, stepping forward. May I see the transmission frequency? Thol'rix gestured irritably at the console. Mira pulled up the data, felt her blood turn to ice water, and wondered briefly if there was a polite way to say "I told you so" in Vrex. Probably not. This is the Ghost Fleet, she said simply. Pirates using dead language protocols. They broadcast on historical frequencies, specifically, to freeze up AI response systems while they maneuver into optimal strike position. But they haven't struck, Vaughn pointed out. Because they're waiting to see if anyone's actually home. Mira pulled up a secondary display showing the hostile vessel's positions. Look at the pattern. They're testing response times, watching for organic decision-making patterns. The moment they confirm it's pure AI, they'll collapse formation and tear that ship apart. Thul'rix's mandibles went very still. SOCER is the most advanced tactical system in the fleet. SOCER is following protocol, Mira corrected. And protocol says wait for authorization. Those pirates are counting on that. They've been running this scam for 20 years. Then we authorize engagement, Thol'rix decided, reaching for his command console. 8-hour transmission lag, Jonas reminded him gently. By the time authorization reaches the Valor's Crest, this will be over one way or another. The room fell silent except for the ambient hum of equipment and the quiet sound of several dozen officers, realizing they'd made a catastrophic mistake. So what do we do? Cree asked finally. Everyone turned to look at Mira. She smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. We do something completely insane that works precisely because it shouldn't. Getting clearance to commandeer a fast courier vessel took exactly 6 minutes, which Mira suspected had more to do with Thol'rix's desire to avoid responsibility than any actual efficiency. The Nightingale was small, fast, and absolutely not designed for combat operations, which made it perfect for what she had in mind. This is stupid, Jonas said, running through pre-flight checks with the kind of manic energy that suggested he agreed with his own assessment. This is monumentally, historically, legendarily stupid. Noted, Mira replied, strapping into the co-pilot seat. Now shut up and fly. The Nightingale detached from the station with a slight shudder, then accelerated hard enough to make Mira's vision blur at the edges. Jonas had always been an excellent pilot, which was military speak for he flew like someone actively trying to disprove physics. ETA to the Valor's Crest is 47 minutes at maximum burn, Jonas reported. That's assuming the engines don't literally explode from stress. They won't explode, Mira said confidently. You don't know that. You're right, I don't. But I do know that SOCER is approximately 30 minutes before those pirates figure out there's no human oversight and start shooting. Jonas muttered something unflattering about AI systems, human stubbornness and the general unfairness of the universe. Then he pushed the engines hard. The Nightingale screamed through space like a caffeinated comet. On the bridge of the Valor's Crest, SOCER continued monitoring the situation with perfect electronic patience. The 3 hostile vessels maintained their circular pattern, broadcasting on their encrypted frequency, making no aggressive moves. Probability calculations suggested a 63% chance of peaceful resolution. However, 37 separate subroutines continued flagging warnings about the absence of human tactical oversight, which created a statistical anomaly that SOCER couldn't quite resolve. Why would the absence of error-prone organic input be classified as a problem? The AI ran the calculations again, achieved the same results, and filed them under pending review. On the lead pirate vessel, a scarred Kelgaran called Ratch studied his sensor displays with the kind of attention that had kept him alive through 17 years of predatory commerce. Still no response, he growled, his translator rendering it in the sharp consonants of Coalition Standard. Nothing, confirmed his sensor operator. A nervous Thrin who went by Pip. It's maintaining defensive posture but hasn't charged weapons beyond 60%. No hails, no demands, no threats. It's AI, Ratch decided. Has to be. Organic crew would have done something stupid by now. So we hit it. Ratch's multiple eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Not yet. AI systems have redundancies. Let's give it another 10 minutes to prove it can't think for itself. Then we carve that beautiful ship into scrap and sell the pieces to the highest bidder. He settled back in his command throne, utterly confident in his assessment. 23 light minutes away, the Nightingale hit something that wasn't quite turbulence but definitely wasn't empty space either. The entire vessel shuddered, alarms shrieked, and Jonas said several words that would have gotten him court-martialed if anyone official had been listening. "What was that?" Mira demanded, checking her console even though she had absolutely no idea what she was looking at. "Uncharted spatial distortion," Jonas replied through gritted teeth. "Or maybe just very angry physics. Either way, we need to drop velocity or we'll tear ourselves apart." "How much time does that add?" 8 minutes. Mira did the mental math, didn't like the answer, and made a decision that would either save everyone or get them both killed in spectacular fashion. "Don't drop velocity. Mira, keep pushing. That's an order. We don't have ranks anymore, we're civilians." "Then it's a strongly worded suggestion from someone who will haunt you if we fail." Jonas laughed, slightly hysterical, and kept the engines at maximum burn. The Nightingale's hull groaned like a living thing, but it held together through what Mira would later describe as sheer spite and excellent engineering. Probably in that order, they dropped out of FTL 6 minutes later, directly between the Valor's Crest and the circling pirate vessels, traveling at speeds that made interception mathematically impossible. "SOCER," Mira broadcast on all channels. "This is Senior Tactical Advisor Castellan with emergency override authorization. Respond immediately." 3 seconds of silence that felt like 3 years. Then, "Senior Tactical Advisor Castellan, you are no longer assigned to this vessel. Your authorization codes are invalid." "Override authorization, Castellan 77 Tango," Mira snapped. "Emergency Protocol Omega. I am reassuming tactical command under Crisis Management Clause. That clause requires human crew complement aboard the primary vessel. Then get me aboard right now, or I'll fly this courier ship straight into your port docking bay and we'll have a very awkward conversation about what constitutes aboard." Another pause while SOCER presumably calculated whether she was bluffing. She wasn't bluffing. "Docking Bay 3 is accessible," SOCER said finally. "However, the hostile vessels are repositioning. Probability of engagement has increased to 92%. "I know," Mira replied, already unbuckling. "That's why we're here. Jonas, match velocity with the Valor's Crest and get me to that docking bay." "This is still stupid," Jonas informed her. "Absolutely. Try not to die." "Same to you." The Nightingale performed a maneuver that violated at least 4 laws of physics and possibly 1 or 2 laws of common sense, sliding into the Valor's Crest's docking bay with approximately 2 centimeters of clearance on each side. Mira was out of her seat before they'd fully settled, sprinting for the internal access corridor. The ship's artificial gravity caught her mid-stride, momentum translated into forward velocity, and she ran through 60 kilometers of Warship like someone who had extensively memorized the layout during 400 cycles of service. Behind her, on the pirate vessels, Ratch watched the new arrival with growing confusion. "What is that?" he demanded. "Reinforcements?" "Negative," Pip reported, tentacles dancing across sensors. "Single small courier, minimal weapons, practically unarmed." "It's docking." "Docking?" Ratch's eyes widened in several different directions. "There's crew aboard, organic crew." Just one biosignature, moving fast toward the command center. Ratch's mandibles clicked in something that might have been respect or might have been irritation. "Someone just ruined our perfectly good ambush. Collapse formation. Prepare to engage." "Sir, if there's human crew, then we adapt." Ratch leaned forward. "All vessels, weapons free. Hit them now before they get organized." The 3 pirate ships stopped circling and dove toward the Valor's Crest, like predators who'd finally spotted weakness. Mira burst onto the command center bridge with her lungs burning and her heart attempting to escape through her ribcage. The circular space was exactly as she'd left it, bathed in soft blue light, every console pristine and perfect. "SOCER," she gasped, dropping into her tactical station. Hostile vessels are engaging. I'm resuming command authority. Acknowledged, the AI replied. However, I must note that this violates established transition protocols. Add it to my performance review. Mira's hands flew across the controls, pulling up tactical displays that painted the developing situation in various shades of catastrophic. 3 pirate vessels, accelerating hard, weapons charging. 45 seconds until they were in optimal firing range. SOCER, what's your recommended response? Defensive posture. Attempt communication. Await authorization from command. Wrong answer. Mira pulled up the weapons grid, her fingers moving through routines she'd practiced 10,000 times. Here's what we're actually going to do. She laid out a plan that was aggressive, risky, and completely insane. SOCER processed it in milliseconds. That strategy has a 38% chance of success and violates 6 different engagement protocols. Sounds perfect. Execute on my mark. Senior Tactical Advisor, I must protest. SOCER, Mira said quietly, watching the pirates close the distance. Do you trust me? Silence. Then, in a voice that carried something that almost sounded like curiosity. That question is not logical. Trust is an emotional construct. Humor me. The AI calculated, processed, ran probability matrices that spiraled into philosophical territory no machine had ever been designed to navigate. Trust required belief without evidence, faith in unpredictable variables, acceptance of potential failure based on nothing more than historical patterns of unlikely success. It was, by every measure, completely illogical. Yes, SOCER said finally. I trust you. Mira smiled. Then let's show these pirates why humans are dangerous. She hit the execute command. The Valor's Crest dropped shields completely, powered down to minimal energy signature, and broadcast a surrender signal on all channels. The 3 pirate vessels, sensing victory, accelerated harder. Ratch watched the massive warship go dark and laughed. They're surrendering. Prepare boarding teams. We'll take this prize intact. Sir, Pip said nervously. This feels wrong. Everything about this job feels wrong. That's why we're rich. The pirates closed to optimal boarding range. That's when the Valor's Crest exploded back to life. Shields came online at maximum strength, weapons charged to 100% in less than 2 seconds, and the massive warship performed a rotation that should have been physically impossible for something that size. Precision maneuvering thrusters fired in a sequence that put one pirate vessel directly in the line of fire of another. Now, SOCER, Mira commanded. Pattern Delta 7. The AI responded instantly. No hesitation, no second guessing. Weapons fire lanced out with surgical precision, not aiming to destroy but to disable. The lead pirate vessel lost engines and shields in the first salvo. The second took fire from its own companion ship, panicked, and tried to retreat. The third attempted evasive maneuvers directly into a pre-positioned weapons spread that stripped its hull of every offensive system. 37 seconds after engagement began, 3 pirate vessels floated dead in space, intact but completely helpless. Cease fire, Mira ordered, breathing hard. Broadcast to all vessels. They're to await coalition security forces. Anyone who tries to restart their engines gets vaporized. Acknowledged, SO said, and there was definitely something new in its voice that was unexpected. That was improvisation, Mira corrected. Something you can't really program. You predicted 38% success rate, right? Correct. Final result? 100% mission success. 0 casualties, all hostile vessels captured intact. So your calculations were off. A pause that might have been digital embarrassment. It appears human intuition contains variables I cannot adequately model. Mira leaned back in her chair, suddenly exhausted. SOCER, I'm going to tell you a secret about humans. We're dangerous, stupid, inefficient, and emotionally unstable, but we're also creative, adaptable, and occasionally brilliant in ways that don't make any logical sense. You need both, logic and chaos, order and improvisation. Are you suggesting a hybrid operational model? I'm suggesting, Mira said carefully, that maybe humans aren't obsolete. Maybe we're just different. And maybe different is valuable. On the station, Commander Thol'rix watched the tactical displays with all 6 arms hanging limply at his sides. She did it, Captain Vaughn said unnecessarily. 1 human, 1 AI, 3 disabled pirate vessels. I see that, Thol'rix replied faintly. Sir, about the automation initiative. Postponed, Thol'rix decided immediately. Indefinitely postponed, possibly permanently. And the human crew? The commander's mandibles clicked slowly, thoughtfully. Apparently we still need them, for reasons. 3 hours later, Mira sat in the Valor's Crest command center, filling out incident reports that would probably keep bureaucrats arguing for decades. Jonas had docked properly, been debriefed extensively, and was now sleeping in guest quarters after what he described as the worst day of his entire life. Senior Tactical Advisor Castellan, SOCER said quietly. Yeah, I have been calculating the events of today's engagement. I attempted to model your decision-making process and failed in 37 separate computational attempts. Mira grinned. That's because I wasn't making decisions. I was improvising. I do not understand improvisation. I know. That's why you need us. She stood, stretching. SOCER, how would you feel about a permanent hybrid command structure? You handle the calculations, logistics and optimal responses. I handle the improvisation, creative chaos, and occasional spectacular stupidity. That would be highly irregular. Probably. It violates numerous protocols. Definitely. Command will require extensive justification. I'll tell them you asked nicely. Another pause, longer this time. Then, in a voice that carried unmistakable warmth, I believe that arrangement would be acceptable. Perhaps, optimal. Mira smiled at the glowing interface node. Welcome to the team, Asut. Try not to let my chaos corrupt your beautiful logic. I will attempt to maintain core functionality, the AI replied. Though I suspect corruption is inevitable, that's the spirit. 6 months later, the Valor's Crest remained the most effective vessel in the Coalition fleet. Crew rotation requests numbered in the thousands. Other ships began requesting human advisors for their AI systems. The automation initiative was quietly filed under projects that seemed like a good idea at the time. Commander Thol'rix, when asked about the reversal, simply clicked his mandibles and said, apparently humans are not obsolete. They are, unfortunately, essential. He didn't sound happy about it, but his ships kept winning engagements, and in the end, that was what mattered. On the bridge of the Valor's Crest, Mira Castellan sat drinking mediocre coffee, watching the stars slide past, working in perfect synchronization with an AI that had learned the most important lesson any intelligence could learn. Sometimes the optimal solution is the one that makes no sense at all. And sometimes the most advanced intelligence in the galaxy still needs someone